This is Grant with ReCraft Creative Reuse Center in Greenville, South Carolina, and this is a challenge video for the Waterworld Loose Parts DIY Art Box. This box is a little bit special because it's the only loose parts box that we've made especially for pre-K and early elementary school. We have lots of other loose parts boxes for elementary and up. This is specifically for pre-K exploration, especially around kind of early science and math. So we made this video so that you parents watching can be the smartest person in the room, or if you're a kid watching this, we already know who the smartest person in the room is. These boxes are for loose parts play. That means open-ended exploration. There are no directions or instructions with this box. So, but they are themed with a surprising variety of stuff in them. So this video is to help explain why we put this stuff in there. You're going to open up this rather boring box and be like, cool stuff, what am I supposed to do with it? This is to help channel your creativity into some specific challenges. First of all, every box comes with three things: a Greenville postcard, because we love Greenville, a vinyl sticker for a car or a book or a window, and a roll of masking tape. We use masking tape because it sticks to just about everything, and importantly, it unsticks when it's time to take things apart. So, also the Waterworld box comes with these, all of them come with these turtles that we got that are just really cool. The shell opens up, you can put treasures in there. So the two challenges. The first one is a sink or float bag. I'll tell you a little bit more about this in a second. The second thing is a challenge to build a boat to make one of the things that sinks float. First of all, sink or float bag. This bag came prepackaged like this actually from the Clemson Science Extension Office, STEM office, and it's an elementary age experiment to talk about density and why things sink or float. Kids are fascinated with water. Without putting a name to it, part of that is this idea that like things feel differently in water. Why is that? Well, the science answer is that water is more dense than air, so things behave differently. But what is density? We want you with this box to ask your little ones open-ended questions and try to get them to drive at the answers, as opposed to teaching them a lesson about what density is. But again, if you want to be the smartest person in the room, what density really is a measure of how much mass or stuff is packed into a volume or space. I explain it at home like putting Matchbox cars in a backpack. If my son takes his backpack, fairly rigid shape, opens it up and puts one Matchbox car in, closes it back up, it's the same shape or space, takes up the same amount of space, or volume would be the real word to use there. It is good to use exact terminology even from a young age, because once they get those concepts, they're really locked in and they're going to pay off in the long run. So same volume, and then take that same backpack and pour a bunch of Matchbox cars in it, close it up, same volume, but there's a lot more stuff in there, and the word there is mass, right? So we talk about heavy and light. Really, it's probably better to use mass again if you're tracking for science, but that is what density is. By the time they're 3 or 4, most kids are going to be able to intuitively tell you that this ball bearing is going to sink. And it definitely does. You want to ask them what they think is going to happen before it actually drops in the water, and definitely ask them to like repeat these things, repeat these experiments. And then there are also corks. They feel lighter. Again, it's not really heaviness that we're going for, because heavy things can float. It's how much mass is crammed into a certain space. So of course the cork floats. Then we've got all of these other random plastic pieces. There's a disclaimer on the box, and I'm saying also again, especially for very, very young kids, please be careful with these small pieces. I'd say definitely safe for 3, but you know, observe your own kids. You know your kids better than anybody else in the world, right? So all of these plastics, something that's really good for especially older kids is to start asking them like, what makes a certain thing float, and like, what is this thing made out of that is making it sink or float? So here's a plastic spoon floating. Here's another one that'll float for a second, but of course if you fill it with water, it's right on the edge and it will sink. Plastic cube, plastic lid. Plastics are made from petroleum, right? Different grades of petroleum, but generally, different experiment you can do. Oil is lighter or less dense than water, so oil is going to float. So things made out of oil are going to float, exactly. So that's the sinker float kit. Kids can have a lot of fun with just that. But the other thing, and this is really the more do it on their own, you know, give them a little bit of space to do this, is challenge your kid to take one of those things that is sunk to the bottom, like our ball bearing here, and use all the other crazy stuff in the box to build a boat so that that object will now float. So starting with just an Easter egg, that's not going to do it. Couple of the key materials that we included for a reason here, whole bunch of coffee stirrers or popsicle sticks. Those are great to kind of lash together and make a raft, if you will, above the surface. That's what the rubber bands here are for. So no tying. Certainly you can try to use the masking tape. Let them try and watch what happens when some of the adhesive like kind of gets in contact with the water, right? So we've also got all these bobbers. We've got corks. And of course, either my favorite or least favorite is the styrofoam block. Normally, I would not consider, we don't have styrofoam in our workshop. I don't consider this a craft material, but we included the styrofoam block because it's a really interesting way to teach kids early on about sustainability. So of all of the things here, styrofoam is the least dense. That's because, so that means it's going to float really well. It doesn't have much density because what styrofoam really is it's plastic that's had air blown into the plastic. It's mostly air. Other thing about this is that it's not recyclable, at least not locally. And because it's made of plastic, it's going to be with us for a very, very, very long time, thousands of years. So it practically never biodegrades. So here we have this material, packaging for a television or whatever it was, and it can't be recycled, and it's just going to take up space on the planet forever and ever. Lots of alternatives to styrofoam. If you want to start that discussion about sustainability, this little block is a great way to do that. So that is it. That's a challenge video. Thank you for watching. Again, we've got the sinker float bag. Encourage, ask open-ended questions, let them see what happens, let them experiment, and second of all, see if they can actually build a floating boat, floatable enough to support some of the things at the bottom of that bin. Thank you for watching. Again, this is the challenge video for the Water World Loose Parts DIY Art Box, and it is specifically made for pre-K kids.